The second a new industry begins to make money, there will be two reactions. On one hand, other industries will see the potential amount of money they're leaving on the table and race to catch up as quickly and as cheaply as possible, and on the other hand, someone might see the same amount of money at the same table and then just try to take it. Enter the civil lawsuit. Of course, suing someone isn't always a cynical cash grab. People and companies have every right to protect and profit off their own creations, and if someone is infringing on that right, then they're left with little choice but to sue. However, it's not always as ethically right as that, and as video games grow in popularity, so too grows the controversy surrounding them. And when there's controversy around a popular form of entertainment, you can always bet that lawyers will not be far behind. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 gaming moments that led to massive lawsuits. Number 10, MANUEL NORIEGA versus Activision. No, you don't have something crazy in your eyes. In 2014, Manuel Noriega, yes, that Manuel Noriega, sued Call of Duty publisher Activision for using his name and likeness in Call of Duty Black Ops 2. For those of you who don't know, Manuel Noriega was the dictator of Panama from 1983 to 1989, and a willing CIA asset. He quickly turned to drug trafficking and other crimes to further consolidate his power until he lost US support and was captured, tried, and convicted. Also part of his history is that he briefly appears in Black Ops 2 as a temporary ally to the player. Noriega sued Activision for violating his right of publicity, a law that prevents using someone else's name or likeness for commercial purposes. The dictator sought an undisclosed amount of damages in the form of lost profit from the game's sales. That suit was dismissed though, as depicting real people in fiction is protected under the First Amendment. It would be different if Activision had prominently featured him in the advertising of the game, as that would be an express interest of generating profit from his notoriety, but that was not the case. So yeah, that's the story of one of the world's most infamous dictators suing a video game in civil court. Number 9, Silicon Knights versus Epic Games. The chain of events that led to the closure of development studio Silicon Knights can only be described as a perfect storm of horribleness and hilarity. It all started with Too Human, an action RPG being developed by Silicon Knights as a PlayStation exclusive in 1999, then a GameCube exclusive in 2000, and then as an Xbox 360 exclusive in 2005. In 2008, it finally hit shelves. On top of the promises of exclusivity to pretty much every major platform manufacturer, Silicon Knights also entered a contract with Epic Games to use the Unreal Engine for all future titles. In 2007 though, Silicon Knights sued Epic for breach of contract, claiming that the engine was unfinished. Epic then countersued, claiming essentially that Silicon Knights knew what they were getting into in regards to the state of the engine. In one of the most hilarious turns of karma, it was discovered during the trial that Silicon Knights had actually plagiarized a ton of copyrighted Epic code as well. Epic not only defeated SK's suit, but won their countersuit and were entitled to several $1 million from the studio. However, then Silicon Knights appealed the verdict to a higher court where Epic won again, entitling them to double the original amount awarded. You've got to know when to fold them, kids. Number 8, NCAA athletes versus Electronic Arts and the NCAA. With this entry, I'm again dealing with the right of publicity, but in a much more reasonable sense. In 2009, former NCAA athlete Ed O'Bannon filed an antitrust class action lawsuit against the NCAA, its licensing company, and Electronic Arts, publishers of NCAA football and NCAA basketball. Student athletes had previously been barred from receiving royalties for the use of their likeness under the pretense that the NCAA was not allowed to profit off its student athletes, even though that's exactly what they were doing with EA. EA even attempted the First Amendment defense that the players in the game were fictional representations in a fictional story. However, since the NCAA video games featured each player's actual likeness and precise statistics, including height and weight, combined with the fact that, college football and basketball games don't have stories, the parties chose to settle the matter out of court, awarding the athletes a total of $40 million. And then, more or less immediately after, EA promptly put an end to the NCAA games so they wouldn't have to pay them again. Number 7, Universal Studios versus Nintendo. Everyone was trying to break into the suddenly burgeoning video game market in the early 1980s, including Universal Studios. In fact, they set about doing this by taking a look at this up-and-coming company called Nintendo. By looking at them, they could hopefully learn from their success and make a fortune making video games based off of their previous properties. Instead, they said, nah, screw all that, and just tried to make a fortune by suing the competition. Universal alleged that they were owed damages for any confusion distinguishing the character King Kong from the character Donkey Kong, and that Nintendo either had to license the name Donkey Kong from them or pull the game from the market outright. It might have been a flawless plan, but Universal apparently doesn't keep very good records. That's because less than a decade prior, Universal had already sued RKO Pictures, the makers of the original King Kong, for the rights to make a new King Kong film under the basis that the character, originally conceived in the 1920s, had entered into the public domain. Naturally, Universal lost the suit largely due to the very precedent they themselves set in their own battle to freely use the character. Number 6. The hot coffee controversy. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, video game controversies were practically daily news, and one such incident was the circus surrounding the hot coffee mod for Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. At one point during development, developer Rockstar had planned to include a sex minigame as a climax, oi oi, for the dating sim elements that were new to the series. After a successful date, your date would then invite you back to her house for coffee. But, it wasn't really coffee, it was sex. Likely out of an interest to avoid this kind of controversy, the sex minigame was eventually cut, but it was left unfinished, buried somewhere in the game's code to be forgotten. Well, until it was exhumed as a user-made PC mod and all hell broke loose. Take-Two patched the content out of the game entirely and removed it from all future retail versions of the sequel, but not before suffering a cavalcade of lawsuits. Angry parents and government officials saw a goldmine, and Take-Two eventually settled for $1 to $2 million, but of course that's not much money when divided among a lot of people and their lawyers. Number 5. Atari vs. Philips. Copycat games are as old as gaming itself, but sometimes the similarity is so glaringly obvious that you wonder if they just copied and pasted the original's code to a T. And that has maybe never been more flagrantly obvious than in the case of Atari vs. North American Philips Electronics. Pac-Man was one of the first products to really put video games on the map. The game was addictive as hell, gobbled quarters by the fistful, and even the disastrous Atari 2600 home release sold record-breaking numbers. Everyone wanted in on the action. Enter then Casey Munchkin for Philips' own Magnavox Odyssey, a game where you control a hungry circle eating dots and running from ghosts. If that description doesn't convince you that it's just a blatant ripoff, then just watch the video footage, it's the exact same game. As a result, this case practically set the precedent for copyright law as it pertains to video games now. While the idea of Pac-Man could not be protected, the concept and feel of the game could be. In Philips' case, it was a mistake to copy not just the idea of the game, but even the art and character designs. As a result, Munchkin was ultimately pulled from the market. However, the game did include a level editor, so in a way, it was maybe ahead of its time, but otherwise a total ripoff. Number 4. Dave Mirra vs. Acclaim Entertainment. We went absolutely nuts for extreme sports during the early 2000s. Once Tony Hawk's Pro Skater hit it big, every unconventional sport was getting its due, often with official endorsements from professionals for multi-game franchises. One such franchise was Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX, Acclaim's answer to Activision's Pro Skater, and its spin-off BMX XXX. Triple X was in every way a Dave Mirra game, but without the basis in reality and with a load of naked women. Instead of being rewarded with video clips from the actual sport, which was a common unlockable in the genre, players would instead unlock videos of women stripping. Dave Mirra was, understandably, not very happy with this. He not only refused to endorse the game, but sued Acclaim for damages to his reputation and brand to the amount of $20 million. The suit was eventually settled with no money changing hands, but a new official Dave Mirra game in the works. XXX predictably sold abysmally, and Acclaim didn't last much longer, filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in 2004. Number 3. Immersion vs. Sony. Remember back when the PlayStation 3 was announced and Sony revealed that they were removing the rumble feature from their iconic DualShock controllers? They claimed at the time that motion sensing technology was the future and that nobody cared about rumble feedback anymore. And then everyone who bought a PS3 stood up and declared, "We absolutely hate this." Well, there was a reason for that debacle, and it wasn't just Sony being weird. In 2002, Sony and Microsoft were actually sued by haptic technology developer Immersion. Immersion argued that Sony and Microsoft had infringed infringed on their patents with their Rumble controllers. And they had pretty good evidence to back this up as well, with Microsoft smartly settling out of court, but Sony, well, they were Sony and Sony fought. And as you can probably guess, Sony lost as well. Not only the initial suit, but 2 subsequent appeals, and by the time it was over, it was decided that Sony owed Immersion over $97 million, plus future royalty payments on sales of their DualShock controllers. Sony couldn't continue to infringe on the patent during legal proceedings, so came up with an excuse that was the equivalent of the dog ate my homework. Number 2, ANDRZEJ SAPKOWSKI versus CD Projekt Red. What possible beef could the creator of The Witcher have with the video game company that turned his creation into a pop culture behemoth? Why, money, of course. It's always money. During CD Projekt Red's pursuit to acquire the license, they offered Sapkowski a percentage share in the game's sales. The author, believing the game would be a colossal failure, instead demanded a one-time payment of, well, substantially less than it would eventually be worth. Needless to say, Sapkowski would eventually come to regret this decision and go on to sue CDPR in 2018 for more than $16 million in lost royalties, arguing that their initial deal was only valid for the first game in the series. CDPR objected to the suit but proved willing to renegotiate Sapkowski's deal. The two parties ultimately reached an agreement, negotiating royalties for Witcher games and other merchandise. We may never know what the final deal was, as it is protected by an NDA that prevents either party from disclosing the details of their new relationship, but let's just be glad that this one ended amicably. Otherwise, we may have never gotten more of The Witcher. Number 1, Jack Thompson versus pretty much everybody. Anyone who was even moderately engaged in the video game industry during the early 2000s probably remembers Jack Thompson, a Florida-based attorney who made it his mission in life to exploit video game controversy in the media for his own profit. I mean, to protect the children. Think of the children. Thompson's misadventures are far too numerous to count here, but of note were his frequent battles with Take-Two Interactive, controversial publisher of games like Grand Theft Auto and Bully, often seeking outrageous damages in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Unsurprisingly, the cases were often always dismissed. Still, anytime a violent tragedy involving a minor was concerned, you could count on Jack Thompson following closely behind, always returning just when you thought he was gone, not unlike Dracula's curse. Eventually, Thompson's aggressive and exploitative tactics would earn him permanent disbarment and a $43,000 fine for his antics. So that's our list. I want to see what you guys think down in the comments below. Are there any major controversies I missed off here that should have been included? And did you learn something new? Either way, though, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't, though, I've been Josh. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.